This is Sawyer Robertson, and you're listening to the Bearcast on SicEm365.com.
Welcome in to the Bearcast on SicEm365.com. Today, I am here with Colt, Barber, and we're going to go through some of our season predictions for the Baylor 2025 season. Colt, we got an article about it on the website, and so we're going to go through some of our different ones. But in general, fall camp's over, season's almost here. How are you feeling kind of about how things have progressed since the beginning of fall?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like high time frame for everyone. Every team in the country is like optimistic about everything that's going on, and I mean, I'm in that boat. Like, I think you look at this Baylor team, and when you're going to predict a season and outcomes, what are you wanting? You want returning players, building on a previous season, and a coaching staff that you feel comfortable with in a lot of spots. And that's what Baylor has right now. And you look at their schedule, did they have advantage over other teams on their schedule? And it's throughout. There's some, depending on how many games you're predicting this team to win, there are some games that the other team could have the advantage, but the majority of Baylor's games, they have the advantage in all those categories. So you feel good going into the season opener against Auburn about how the entire season is going to play out. Now, which of those games can you capitalize on? I think that's up for grabs. I think those are the reasons you feel optimistic, but obviously we talk about personnel, we talk about depth. Then it becomes, okay, can Baylor overcome those situations, those issues because of the positives, the coaching staff, the returning players? Do those things outweigh your negatives? I think Baylor's in a good spot, but you have to wait until the season plays out.
Right. I think a big storyline this year is going to come from, can Baylor win home games? Because I do kind of believe that their 5 toughest opponents, 4 of them will play at McLean Stadium. When you look at Auburn, Arizona State, Kansas State, and Utah, all of them will have to come to Waco. So if Baylor can hold serve at home, should be a really, really good year. So let's start with our first prediction for the season. Let's just start with our, in general, record prediction for the year. I kind of want you to dive a little deeper, though. I want you to say your record, but also where those losses are coming from.
Yeah, so I've kind of looked at this. We're talking about this before we got on air. And how does this season play out? How do you land on predictions? And I think there's so many 50-50 games. You say, okay, can Baylor split these games? Can Baylor split these games? And then where does it ultimately put Baylor? So I landed on 9-3. Now, I teeter between 9-3, 10-2. Because of those factors that we discussed. It's like, does Baylor have an advantage in quarterback play? Does Baylor have an advantage in returning players in terms of depth of returning players versus teams that are still kind of filling their way out because they added so much from the portal? SMU is a great example of that. So I stick on 9-3 because I think there's 6 games that could go either way, that if Baylor splits all of those, they end up 9-3. Now, obviously, you can go more, win more than that, lose more than that, but it's like Auburn, Arizona State are 2 that I kind of have in the categories. Like, can you win that? Can you win one of those games at home? Excuse me. Auburn, SMU, not Auburn, Arizona State. Then you have Arizona State and Kansas State. And then you have Utah in there, and Utah and TCU. So it's like, if Baylor splits those games, where do they ultimately fall? 9-3. And that's kind of, you could trend to the lower side of that, maybe 8-4 or up to 10-2. But I think that's a good starting point before we know what this team really has when they hit the field.
Real quick, Sawyer Robertson has something to remind you about.
Want the latest information about your favorite team? Try out SicEm365 premium content the next 3 months for just $5 by clicking the link below.
And now back to the Bearcast. Right now, I mean, just to be clear, the over-under is at 7.5. So, I mean, we're kind of basically saying you should definitely take the over with Baylor this year. At least it feels that way. I feel like the floor is 7-5, and there's a lot of possibilities to go up to probably 10-2. I would say it's probably the ceiling. Obviously, you can maybe make a case for 11-1 or 12-0 if you're really, really optimistic. But I think 10-2 is probably about right for a ceiling. And I think it's interesting when I was going through this, because I went through the entire season of the Big 12, literally have gone through every single game, picked every single game. I just think Baylor's going to start 3-0. I really do. Like, the more that I've done research, the more that I've looked into this, like, I think they're getting Auburn at the right time. Yeah. Auburn's bringing in a lot of new pieces. I think Auburn's going to get better throughout the year. They're very talented, but Baylor should win that game at home, first game with a cohesive group. And then SMU, man, I just think their defense is going to be bad, especially up front. And I don't know how they're going to stop Baylor from running the football pretty consistently. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I think Baylor drops 2 games in conference play. The first one being the Arizona State game, the second one being the TCU road game. A couple different theories there. I think Arizona State's the most complete team.
Yeah.
Defensively, specifically in the trenches as well. Offensive line, defensive line, they're probably the only team in the Big 12 that I think is in the top 3 in both. And so I think they're right there as far as offense line, defense line goes. I think that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a really good game, but I give Arizona State a slight edge in their first meeting. And then I have a TCU just rivalry game late in the year. I think it's just one of those things where what they do really well is probably Baylor's biggest weakness when it comes to stopping the pass and being in the secondary. And I think TCU will be better than I think a lot of people think. So that's where my 2 losses come from. I do think Baylor will meet Arizona State in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah. I mean, you look at last year, the top 4 teams finished 7-2. Tiebreakers all the way across the board to figure out the Big 12 championship game. Like, I would not be surprised if something like that happened again this year. And I know that we talk about, the over and under 7.5 wins for this Baylor team. What is the highest 8.5 for the entire Big 12? Is that what the number was? Was it Kansas State and Texas Tech were both at 8.5? And I'm like,
and Arizona State
was Arizona State was up there. They're all, but the window was like 5.5 to 8.5 for all 16 teams. So like this could go really any way and not be surprised. So if you're going to pick overs, I'm picking overs for a multitude of teams because the bar is so low right now. These teams aren't going to all go 8-4. Like someone's going to rise to the top. You hope it's Baylor, but the 8-4 predictions that some of these teams are getting, someone's going to go over that. It's just who is it going to be? That's where you end up on that 8.5 over and under lines. Like we don't know who it's going to be, but someone's going to do it.
And the clear lines for me are that I think some of these teams at the bottom are actually going to be pretty bad this year. And it's something that I've been trying to wrestle with a little bit. But I just see some give up factor. I see some teams that don't have the talent maybe in year 1 of coaching staff. And then you got situations like BYU where it's like, man, I can't possibly predict BYU to win more than 8 games this year without a quarterback. Like they're starting a true freshman quarterback or redshirt freshman, whatnot.
That's a tough situation for them.
Yeah, like I can't possibly predict them to be better, even though with Retzlaff, I think they're actually a contender. And so, yeah, it's just it's an interesting year for the league, but definitely there are some teams I feel much better about. And I think you're right. There's going to be a jam-packed top.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and I know you kind of lead the way on this, but are there any games on Baylor's schedule like they're undoubtedly winning that game? Do you feel that way about any of them?
I do. And this is one of those things where it's like, it's how I feel about the Big 12.
Outside of Sanford.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah. So I do not see Baylor anyway that Baylor loses to Arizona at the end of the year because I think that team is ripe to be giving up by the time Baylor plays them. I don't see it. I don't see them losing the last game of the year to Houston. I think Houston is going to be better. But I still don't think on the road that they're going to be talented enough to win a game that's probably going to be pretty meaningful to Baylor. And I think Houston will already be bowl eligible by then. So I don't think that game's going to matter as much for them. And then UCF. I think UCF's going to be a train wreck. They brought in a ton of transfers. I think the number was like 67 transfers. It has nothing to do really with Scott Frost. I know he was terrible at Nebraska, but it more so has to do with I don't think they have the talent to compete on a week-to-week basis, especially on the road again. So those were the ones that I looked at and said, yeah, Baylor's definitely going to win those. And then there's a few that I feel pretty comfortable with, specifically the Oklahoma State game. Lots of transfers, lots of new pieces, unsure about quarterback, still haven't named a quarterback. I just think, I know it's a trap game, sort of, but I don't see them being that much better than they were a year ago.
Yeah, typically you go to Oklahoma State and you're worried about the crowd. Maybe you're playing there late in the year and you're worried about the weather. Well, Baylor gets them in September. The crowd, who knows where they are with Gundy. I haven't really got a pulse on Oklahoma State, but that's the first one that you feel like it's the road game, so it makes you a little nervous because it's Stillwater. Baylor has this historical just issues in Stillwater. It's always happened, and they have won some games there, but it seems like few and far between. But that game, I don't want to say that I'm feeling like confident about SMU, but I think that game's so early for SMU, and they have a lot of moving pieces. You mentioned their defense, like that's in that category. It's like I feel like Baylor should win that game. I don't know if they will. You never know what SMU's gonna be able to put on the field, but the way that one aligns, I feel that way. But truly, the back end of Baylor's schedule, if they can get to that back end of UCF, Utah at home, at Arizona versus Houston, like 3 or 4 at home of games that you feel like we should win those games, and then the Arizona game that you said maybe Arizona's checked out at that point. Like you could end up in that, beginning of November sitting really, really well to make it to the Big 12 championship game if you can take care of business early. So yeah, I don't know. I guess you feel optimistic because of where this team is and how they finished last year, but I just like some of these matchups throughout the year that maybe weren't on the schedule last year.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next category here. I feel like this was kind of unanimous. We did our offensive MVP and our defensive MVP, and both you and I had the same answer. We had Sawyer Robertson for offensive MVP. I think pretty clear reasons for that, and then Keaton Thomas for defensive MVP. I guess let's just talk about those two really quick. I do think we should probably add maybe just a little bit of commentary on maybe a couple other names that could have fit the bill, just to give people kind of a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, for Sawyer Robertson, for me, in a Jake Spavital offense, Baylor's going to run the football well, but the quarterback position is going to get a ton of the recognition in this particular offense. And we saw it last year. It kind of started showing itself when Sawyer took over games. Think about the Texas Tech game specifically, where the running attack was really good, but Sawyer threw for 5 touchdowns and almost 300 yards. Very efficient in that game. I just think that by the end of the year, that if your quarterback has good numbers, you're going to have won plenty of games, and he's going to be the MVP. And that's not to say Bryson Washington can't be good. I don't think any of the receivers are going to get enough touches because there's so many targets to get those numbers up there. Where you say, man, yeah, Josh Cameron went for 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. He should probably be the MVP. Unfortunately, that's not the way they're going to spread this ball around. It's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, Baylor's season hinges on Sawyer Robertson being a very good quarterback, and if they have a good season, he's the MVP.
Right. I mean, the offensive line's really good as well, but there's not one guy that you can single out and say, oh, he's going to be the offensive MVP. So I do think Sawyer Robertson is the answer here. I do think there's one other guy who has the potential to just break a ceiling or break a bunch of records, and that's Bryson Washington. Like if Jake Spavital decides, hey, man, we're just going to keep giving him the football, he's going to score all the touchdowns on the ground, and he's going to play 12, 13 games this year. I mean, it's going to be hard for him not to get that ceiling. But again, I do think they're going to try to spread the ball around to Caden Knighton and, some of their other guys, Joseph Dodds, Michael Turner at some points, to where it kind of limits his ceiling. So yeah, I think Sawyer Robertson's the easy answer. I also think when it comes to impacting winning, quarterback is kind of the position you have to go with. So if Baylor's going to actually win the Big 12, make a college football playoff, it's going to be because Sawyer Robertson was so good all year long. Flipping over the defensive side, we mentioned Keaton Thomas. So really quickly on him, this was a very easy answer for me. Dave Aranda loves his linebackers. He really allows them to be very productive in his defensive scheme. We've seen that with Terrell Bernard. We've seen that with Dylan Doyle. We've seen that with Matt Jones. Like a lot of guys being productive, and Keaton Thomas is also an athletic freak. And so you put all that together, I feel really good about that pick. I also think he's the best NFL prospect on Baylor's roster at the moment. I think he'll probably be in the NFL after this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to him is the defensive line playing well in front of him. I think they got that to an extent last year with he and Matt Jones playing behind a solid defensive line. I think it has much more potential to be better this year, considering the size that they've had. Just guys emerging. They lost a little bit, but it's like, was it not addition by subtraction, but did you just get better across the board? I think he's in play behind a defensive line that's better. And he's a first team. He's a first team All Big 12 pick last year. Like, it's not like this is a guy that was a honorable mention 5th team type guy. He was a first team All Big 12 linebacker as a sophomore, his first year in the system. So how much better can he get? I think he can get a lot better. And that's kind of crazy to say, but if he's taking some of these responsibilities and giving them to more depth at linebacker, where he's focused on just becoming a playmaker. He's focused on blitzing the quarterback and pass it. His numbers could jump up through the roof, and then everyone really takes notice. But I remember having conversations when he was first recruited and he first got on campus. Like, how good can he be? Well, he's still young, but everyone that you talk to is like, this guy's potential is through the roof. He was a former safety, but he's 6'2", 6'3", going to be 240 by the time he leaves here. And now he's there and he can make plays. So perfect tailor-made linebacker for Dave Aranda's defense.
Absolutely. As far as other guys that were candidates for potential defensive MVP, there really weren't a lot of names that came to my mind that could really challenge Keaton Thomas. I think the first one for me that came to mind was Jackie Marshall. Just him having a really good season, him actually getting the accolades that he probably deserves with better defensive line play. And then outside of him, it was kind of like, you're kind of guessing, right? Like Amarian Winston, Matthew Fobbs-White, maybe Devin Bobby as a stalwart at safety. But was there anyone else that came to mind besides kind of that group?
No, I was going to say dark horse Amarian Winston. I mean, we've heard so much about him in terms of being a leader, making plays, flashing. I think he's a true what you want at that position. And so we haven't really seen an outside linebacker take over in this defense. So he's kind of my dark horse. It's like, if he is what that every single down player can be at that edge position, maybe he becomes that MVP, but that might be a year away too. He has been in a similar scheme at Oregon, played behind some really talented guys, but we haven't seen him do it. He's had, plenty of snaps. He has plenty of experience. So you're not worried about that, but it's just like, can he take it to the next level? I think he has that chance, but I just would never rank him above Keaton Thomas at this point.
Okay. So as far as kind of other areas that we looked at, we also kind of gave our hot takes for the season. And so I think this is a good time to kind of go through maybe what some of our takes were for Baylor's 2025 season. Remember, these are hot takes. These are kind of bold predictions. These aren't necessarily stuff we expect to happen, but more so stuff that we think could happen. So Colt, your first one was your medium take. We also have hot take and then scorching take, but what was your medium take for the Bears this season?
Yeah, I'm trying to find my medium take here. Where did these go?
You're good. Here, I'll give mine first.
Yeah, you go ahead. I'm pulling it up.
Okay, so I think I mentioned this earlier, but I think Baylor's going to go undefeated in the non-conference. They're going to beat Auburn. They're going to go on the road and knock off a top probably 15 ranked SMU team along with Samford. And that means that also kind of adds up to, I think they're going to go into their first conference game against Arizona State as a top 15 team, and College game day will be in Waco. I know this seems like a lot. I'm putting a lot of pieces together for it to just be a medium take, but I look at Arizona State. I think they're going to be undefeated. I look at Baylor. I think they're going to be undefeated. And so you're probably going to be looking at two teams inside the top 15. Arizona State might even be inside the top 10 probably at that point. I just think it adds up for College game day to be in Waco. And I think that's a lot of moving parts. I mean, to win a game against Auburn, an SEC team, to go on the road and beat a top 15 ACC team, and then to have College game day. Yeah, it would be a lot, but I think it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, that you went a different direction than I did in terms of this take. Mine were all season based and just kind of what the expectations were. My first medium take was mostly about the offense. And I think for the first time in a very long time, Baylor averages medium take wise over 40 points per game. Last year, we know they finished strong and they averaged, I don't know what the final tally was for the season, but they're up there towards 40 points per game at the end of the season, that stretch where they were playing so well. I think they do that over the course of a season. And that's kind of my medium take. I think they have that potential to do that. Really depends on the Auburn and the SMU game, obviously, because I think that you can weather maybe not scoring as many against Arizona State. Maybe you don't score as many against Kansas State, but they can get that average up there at the beginning of the year and sustain it. I think that's a real possibility. And that ultimately leads into my prediction of a 9-3 season. I think if the offense does that, it can carry them to 9-3 regardless of what the defense is. That's a lot of points to score. That means you're moving the ball. You have control with the run game when you need it. That leads into 9-3. But that's my medium take, is that Baylor averages over 40 points for the entire season, which I would have to look back. I didn't do the research on it. When was the last time that Baylor did that? I would assume 2015, that for the entire season they averaged over 40 points per game.
Right. Yeah, you'd have to go back a long ways. I think when I was doing the math on how I predicted every game to unfold, I think I had Baylor at 38 points per game. So, yeah,
Right there.
40 would be a nice jump up for sure. Okay, so moving on to our hot take. Again, these are going to get increasingly more difficult to happen. But for my hot take, I said that I think records are meant to be broken, and there's two specific ones that I think are at risk potentially. Bryson Washington breaking Terrence Ganaway's record of 21 rushing touchdowns. That's a lot of rushing touchdowns. But I think, when we talk about Caden Knighton, his impact, when we talk about Joseph Dodds, his impact, I think a lot of that's going to be in between the 20s. I really do. I think when you get down to the goal line, it's going to be hard to take Bryson Washington out of games if he's healthy. A lot of this is contingent on his health, but if he gets all of those goal line carries, I think there's a chance that he comes for that record that Terrence Ganaway set back in 2011. And then the other kind of part of this, because I'm saying that both records are going to get broken, Drake Dabney's single season tight end receiving record of 552 yards. I think Michael Trigg is coming for that record as well this upcoming season. I think he's going to go for over 600 yards this year. So both of those together make up my hot take.
Yeah, I mean, that one to me, the only reason that Michael Trigg doesn't get to that number is because there's going to be so many potential weapons. Now, if he just becomes the de facto number 2 target, number 3 target, that number obviously, but if he doesn't get there, it's not because he's not capable, it's because he has 5 other guys that are getting touches that are taken away. The Bryson Washington number, 12, he had 12 last year. Dawson had 6. Those are not total touchdowns. Those are rushing touchdowns. So just combine those numbers, 18 total, and you're sitting in a pretty good position. But yeah, I like both of those picks. Mine actually went back to the team record. I went hot take in the opposite direction. I feel like this was a pretty good hot take. Baylor starts 2-4, and they finish 6-6, and that's a hot take because I don't think they finished 6-6. That's me breaking it down into very similar to last year where they finished 6-0 to finish the regular season. I don't see this team having that type of stretch this season. You might go and lose to Auburn and start 2-2 on the season, but I don't think it's going to be because of the way it was last year. So I don't know if that really counts. That's the direction I went. I just think it's a hot take because I don't think this team has that type of regression from last year. I think this team has that full potential to weather those storms, maybe start 2-2, but then climb out and finish strong to end the season. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I would be pretty disappointed at 2-4. And that's part of the reason this is a hot take because I just don't see it happening.
Man, if that were to happen, I think we'd be right back to right before the 2024 season as far as, head coaching, job security, talks about, the direction of the program. Because, man, and I think that is what makes that Auburn game so important. Because I do think if you beat Auburn, it kind of eliminates the possibility in my eyes of you starting 2-2. I think it gives you it puts you in a much better place to start. It
changes the outlook for the next coming games. Like it changes the outlook of the SMU game. It changes the outlook of the Arizona State game in a lot of ways. But yeah, not to cut you off. That game can tell you a lot about the rest of the season pretty quick.
It absolutely can. Okay, we got one more take to go through here. It's a scorching take. And I think this one's pretty scorching, even though we both have Baylor, or at least I have Baylor in the college football playoff because I have them winning the Big 12. But not only do I think Baylor makes it to the college football playoff, I think they get the Big 12's second ever college football playoff win. I think they go on the road to Oregon, to Autzen Stadium. They beat Oregon, and Baylor advances to the second round of the college football playoff before losing to Georgia, number 2 seed Georgia, in the next round. I couldn't get there. I was looking at who could be in the top 4. I was trying to figure out, who could Baylor beat? And I didn't really see it. The one team that stood out to me as, oh man, if they got there, maybe they could beat them if they happen to line up, would be like a Penn State. But I don't think Baylor's quite ready to beat a team like Georgia with the defensive line and offensive line advantages.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge challenge to do. So what was your overall record, regular season Big 12 championship to get to that point?
Yeah, so regular season 10-2, win the Big 12 championship 11-2, win your college football playoff game 12-2, lose to Georgia. So 12-3 would be what it would be.
So your scorching take is ultimately, in my eyes, that they win a college football playoff game.
Yes, it'd be only the second one ever. TCU beating Michigan is the only Big 12 win in the college football playoff right now.
Yeah. So I guess we're in alignment because part of mine scorching hot take is that Baylor wins the college football playoff game. But my really scorching hot take is that I believe that Baylor could go 13-0. I think there's that like 0.05 or 0.5% chance that Baylor has that potential. And it's all because of the offense. And if you don't talk about the offense, but there's not a game that I look at on this schedule that I say not going to win. And that's where I land on this. It's like I don't think that's going to happen. But if you look at the schedule, there's not going to be a game where they're bigger than, depending on how the season unfolds, obviously. But right now, there's not going to be a game that they're more than 2.5 point underdogs. And I think most of the time they're going to be an even or a favorite. And because of that, I land on 13-0 doesn't seem just outside the realm of possibility. Now, so many things have to align for that to happen. It just is uncommon now in any league. But I think that if there is any teams in the Big 12, Arizona State, Baylor are the two that have that ability, and it's because of their potential balance on the offensive and defensive lines, the returning production that they have there. And offensively, specifically, you return a quarterback, you should have a good running game. Everyone else on the schedule in the Big 12, Auburn notwithstanding, I think Auburn's plenty talented to do that. I don't know if anyone else can do that. But that's my scorching take. 13-0, win a college football playoff game to go 14-0, and then ultimately lose that next round. I don't know who it's going to be against. I don't know who they'll play in the Big 12 championship. But if I'm picking a scorching take, that's it. 13-0 with the college football playoff win to go to 14-0.
I like what you said on that because I think the other team that, at least in my eyes, is the third best team in the Big 12 and the most likely candidate to make it to the Big 12 championship is Kansas State because of, again, offensive and defensive. But their question is, how good is their quarterback? And, we're going to find out how good Avery Johnson is. And if he does take that step forward, then I do think Kansas State's probably in that same kind of place as Baylor and Arizona State, just with their foundation on offense and defense, their running game, all of those things. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Arizona State, Baylor, those are the two teams that I just think are the most complete at the moment. They return a lot and they have a quarterback that I trust. And I think at the end of the day, that kind of matters the most to me. So yeah, so you got potentially 13-0. I'm very interested in seeing how the season unfolds as far as, is Baylor a favorite in every game? Because I do think if they beat Auburn, you go into that SMU game, there's a chance that it's even or that Baylor's favored in that game, especially if they look good against Auburn. I think they would probably give the edge to SMU that early in the season. Yeah. But then if you beat SMU, I don't think Baylor's going to be the underdog in any of these games. And you mentioned the fact that, look at all the home games. I mean, it's really, they're playing a lot of the bad teams on the road, which sometimes is a bad thing. But I think in Baylor's case, when you're trying to reach this super high ceiling, this is what you want. You want all your tough games to be at home. Then you want to go on the road and just find ways to pull out these wins on the road in Big 12 play, which is much easier said than done.
Yeah. I mean, and it's obviously this is a scorching take for a reason. And there's not very many teams that fall in that category. And we can talk about Texas Tech. The reason we don't talk about Texas Tech right now is because Baylor doesn't face Texas Tech. That could be the team that Baylor faces in the Big 12 championship. So I don't know if Tech has that potential. I think when you relying on so many transfers that becomes an issue. But they're a team that I guess you could possibly put in there. I don't know about the running game situation now after losing Joyner, but Kansas State, Arizona State, Baylor have that potential, and they all play each other. So I think, which of that teams come out on top, kind of that round robin, who wins those games is ultimately in the Big 12 championship, at least one of the teams.
Yeah, I just finished up my Big 12 predictions, and I had Tech stumbling down the stretch a little bit.
There you go. You heard it right
their
here.
Last game of the year, just because, we like talking about Texas Tech, their last game of the year is a sneaky one. Because I think when you look at these teams around the Big 12, teams that could give up, I specifically look at Cincinnati, Arizona. I think those are the most hot seat teams, those two. Yeah. Whereas UCF and West Virginia, I think they're not going to be good, but I don't think their teams are going to give up because their coach is going to be there. You're trying to build a foundation. Well, Texas Tech, the last game of the year in the freezing cold, is going to have to go to Morgantown, and they're already going to be eliminated from Big 12 championship play. I don't think they're going to, I think they're going to have 3 losses by then and be out of it pretty much. And then you got to go to West Virginia. I hate where that falls for Texas Tech. I have Tech going 8-4. Just for anyone out there that's listening, I think they could go 9-3. I obviously could be wrong, but I think they might go 8-4. I don't trust their quarterback. I actually think if they switch to Will Hammond, they have a better shot at potentially winning the conference. But that's where I land with them. I have Utah and TCU ahead of them, I think, in the final standings, with Iowa State kind of being sneaky around there as well. But I think that's pretty much it when you talk about teams that could win the Big 12. I know everyone's looking for their Arizona State again this year, but I do think I think it's 6 teams that I feel like can win the Big 12, I think is what I fell on. Either 6 or 7. Baylor, Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Utah, and TCU. I don't even think Iowa State's in that.
And the challenge is that you have unbalanced schedules. So we talk about Kansas State, we talk about Arizona State, we talk about Utah, we talk about West Virginia, or not West Virginia, Texas Tech. Like, ultimately, unless you're like you did, analyzing every single schedule, every single game, it's really hard to project these things just from what it was 7 years ago, where it's like everybody plays everybody kind of knows who's the best, and that's the easiest way to determine it. There wasn't even a Big 12 championship game because of that reason. It's like, we know who's the best. We don't need to determine this. We have head-to-head, and that's all that matters. Well, now it's like a 9-3 and 9-3 aren't always equal. And Baylor's schedule this year, Baylor could end up, let's say, 7-5. And you feel like we're actually probably better than we were a year ago. Baylor feels that way, but it's not the case. You hope that they go beyond that. But then you could take a schedule like Texas Tech's, and that just is, they don't play TCU, they don't play Baylor. I don't even know all of the ins and outs of it. I know they have a tough one at Arizona State, but in general, it's just like, if you set up any other team, Kansas State, Arizona State, Baylor, with that schedule, I mean, where's the over and under for those teams? I mean, that, like, I don't know that. I could probably have a decent outlook, but in general, the Big 12 is unbalanced because of these schedules. And, I mean, we saw it last year. Iowa State goes into the Big 12 championship game and gets spanked by Arizona State. And not because it was all about unbalanced schedules, but we just simply don't know everything about these teams until postseason play.
I will say the one thing that is going against Tech when it comes to their conference schedule is the fact that they have to go to Utah, to Arizona State, and to Kansas State.
Yeah,
that is just really, really tough. That I'm not saying that that's 3 guaranteed losses, but it's different from Baylor, because you look at Baylor's schedule and you're going on the road to Cincinnati or Oklahoma State or Arizona. Tech's going to 3 of the top 6 teams in the league, and kind of a clear tier of their own type situation. So the schedules are unbalanced. Tech's playing no one in the non-conference, so they kind of should have to play a little bit of a tougher schedule in the conference play. For sure.
I'll say about that game, and here we are talking about Texas Tech, and it's fine. I think it's a rivalry that the Big 12 needs. But Oregon State, who's their quarterback, who just named their starting quarterback, Malik Murphy, that transferred from Duke, is a starting quarterback at Oregon State. And I'm not saying that Oregon State's going to win that game, but that dude can create issues for any defense because of his size and his arm strength. So you go and play that game. Don't be surprised if Texas Tech leaves a little bit concerned, regardless if they win, because of the way that he plays offensive football with Malik Murphy. Like, he's a big dude and he can throw the football. Like, I'm just saying, like, that's a guy that you don't want to face in the non-conference, in my mind.
Man. Yeah, I have Texas Tech beating Oregon State pretty badly. I'm
just saying, they play at Oregon. The game's at Oregon State, right? Oh, it's in Lubbock. Never mind. Well, I mean, I don't know, man. I think that there's that. I would be concerned about him if you're playing. He's done it. He did it at Duke last year. He was good at Duke last year. Like, he's a guy that has played a lot of football, and he's not going to play that game to lose. I just think it's something to keep an eye on. It's good in the first game of the season. For a team like Texas Tech that's going to rely on a ton of transfers, they're going to be hyped and juiced, but you get one long run with him running over a defender, and it becomes an issue for them the rest of the game.
Well, they got Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and then Kent State before they play Oregon State, so they get a little bit of a tune-up, but I would be pretty surprised if that game challenged. I don't think they're going to be challenged, which in the long run is why I think they're going to show up to Salt Lake City in the first week of conference play, and be like, oh no, like this is a completely different level of competition that we're
yeah.
facing here. And I think that's where they stumble initially to start the year. But it was fun going through all the conference games. I do it every single year. So be sure to check out Sikkim 365 Premium to go through, see all my predictions. I'll have my last one up tomorrow, and then I'll have kind of bowl projections as well, where I'll pick all the bowl games, where everyone's going to end up. I actually think I ended up with like 12 teams making a bowl game for the Big 12, which
that's great.
Probably too many.
Well,
yeah, it's probably too many.
It's not impossible, though. It's not impossible. I mean, a lot of games and a lot of teams that play different teams, so.
Yeah, definitely a chance. So we'll see how it all plays out. But we will be back next week. We're going to preview Auburn. We'll also have a premium podcast, which will be a mailbag. And I think we'll also probably do a separate one for Big 12 picks. But we'll see kind of how we're feeling on that. But again, be sure to check out Sikkim 365 Premium. If you are not a premium subscriber, we have all kinds of content coming, especially for this season as it's finally here. Baylor will take on Auburn on August 29th to kick things off. But thanks for listening today. This has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.
Join Sikkim 365 Premium on a $1 for 1 month trial to read our experts' notes and insights. Know about high school commits, off-season transfers, coaching staff changes, and so much more before the rest. Also, download the Sikkim 365 app on your iPhone today to get instant notifications of breaking news, read up on the latest inside info, easily interact with other Baylor fans on our forums, and get alerts for anything published by your favorite staff members.